Welcome back. The Biden administration is now pushing back on reports that a Parkinson's specialist visited the White House at least 8 times during the middle of 2023, claiming that the doctor was not there to visit the president, also insisting that Biden has not seen a neurologist outside of his annual physicals. Biden's physician, meanwhile, Dr. Kevin O'Connor, claimed in a new memo that Dr. Kevin Kennard, has been visiting patients at the White House for a dozen years. That is the Parkinson's specialist. Joining me now is North Carolina Congressman Greg Murphy. He is the GOP Doctors Caucus co-chairman. He's also a member of the House Veterans Affairs Administration and House Ways and Means Committees. Congressman, thanks very much for being here this morning. And I wanted you to come back because you've been so on top of this story. You told us this, exposed this truth about Joe Biden on this program almost a year ago to this date, warning about the commander-in-chief's decline. Let's take a look.
And so I have seen patients through the year decline mentally. It's just a fact. It's what happens. And the fact that these outbursts now are happening, which, again, he would remember he was going to be the most gentle and gentile president ever. The fact that he's having these labile emotional swings, outbursts to his staff, really speaks. A form of dementia has that. You can't control your emotions, or if you can't get the words out you want to, become very frustrated. Let's just be honest. The guy's not fit for office. He never was fit for office. And he surely would not be fit for another 5 years. I don't believe Joe Biden's running the show. I believe he's a puppet for a progressive left committee.
And joining me now, the man himself, Congressman, thank you so much for your honesty to our viewers. I know they appreciate it very much. That was all the way back in July of 2023 when you, with your incredible experience as a doctor, pointed this out. Tell us more and assess what we're seeing and having this conversation today post that debate.
Well, Maria, it's just the coming to fruition of what we've all seen. You know, the Democratic mantra has been, don't believe what you see, believe what we tell you. And the fact that if you've had some a physician who specializes in Parkinson's, come to the White House 8 times, and then if you go back and you look at Dr. O'Connor's physical examination of him, and then you'd only know this as a physician, if you go in and you look at the neurologic exam, he's very pointed in pointing out specific things that are not Parkinson's. I think this is a, I haven't physically examined him, but Parkinson's is generally a clinical diagnosis where you have something called bradykinesia, slow movement. You're not able to move fluidly, and so many of these other things. But here is the kicker. Here's the kicker. If, God forbid, this is Parkinson's, I don't wish this on anybody. Parkinson's has about an 80% chance of developing into dementia up to that point. So are we going to elect somebody who does not have a clean bill of health, who is afraid to take a cognitive test, who perhaps has a disorder that has about an 80% chance of having dementia with it, if it's not already present? What is this fleece on America that the Democrats are bringing upon us? It's sad, it's tragic, and it's a matter of national security.
Well, I mean, how does he operate with one of these disorders? We're told that he's at his best between, 10 and 8 p.m. I mean, from a practical matter, how does he handle the issues that come every day for a commander-in-chief if, in fact, it is one of these disorders that you're referring to?
Well, I think, as we've said for a long time, I don't know that he's handling these things. These may be a committee of unelected bureaucrats. It may be Schumer, Pelosi, and that's why they want to cling to this power so hard. I don't think he's making all the decisions. I mean, come on, look at him. He can't be. He's fine if he's reading from a teleprompter. I think, truly, Maria, this is a national tragedy. The American people are being lied to, just like the cocaine bag that they found in the White House. We're being lied to by the White House, and this is not what democracy is all about.
And what would you say about the path of some of these disorders? I mean, is this something that can be stable for a long time, and even though, or does it progress worse?
Well, everybody's different with Parkinson's. Again, I'm not a Parkinson's physician, but I take care of older individuals. On his medicine list, there was not something called levodopa or some of the other things that we see, but we don't know if the list is really being true of medications that are there to control symptoms. We don't see the cogwheeling that we saw with Hitler in his final days. That's what they have when they have this tremor. And so I just think we're being lied to. He hasn't done press conferences in forever. Things are being covered up. You remember how how just barely a month ago, Pelosi was saying how acute and how astute and how sharp he is. Obvious lies to the American people.
Oh yeah, no, there's been a cover-up underway, and this is one of the greatest cover-ups of all time. I mean, you look at some of the comments Kamala Harris has made, how great Joe Biden is over the last year. I mean, the cover-up has been deep and far. But I want to get your take on the First Lady. Washington Post readers sending letters to First Lady Jill Biden, urging her to tell President Biden to withdraw from this race, to make room for a younger generation, Congressman. You've also taken issue with Jill, the First Lady, after the debate. You wrote this on X. It's called practicing medicine without a license. Dr. Jill Biden, disgraceful that you would allow your husband to put our nation in peril. You have a doctorate. You are not a doctor. If you were, you would be committing malpractice. Tell us more.
Yeah. I think that's very succinct. I like the guy who wrote that. I think it's very true. I think she's clinging to power. She loves being the First Lady. I mean, just think about your wife and your husband, how much you're supposed to care for that other person that you've been bonded to for life, and she's allowing him and actually pushing him to do all these things. I think it's horrible. I just think it's horrible.
At least 7 Democrats are now publicly calling for Biden to resign. After holding those conference meetings yesterday, there are others, 3 others, that say Biden cannot beat Trump. Axios is reporting that the movement to remove Biden, though, is losing steam now, saying that the House's meeting left some swing district Democrats with actual tears. Another report saying that they felt like the meeting was a funeral. New York Congressman and House Judiciary Committee ranking member Jerry Nadler now flipped. He initially said he called for the president to drop out of the race, saying he can't win. Now, I guess he got a call from the White House or somebody, because he's completely flipped. He's actually saying, no, I'm with Biden. Here's Nadler yesterday. Watch.
Yeah.
Do you have concerns about him being on the top of the ticket?
Whether I have concerns or not, is beside the point. He's going to be our nominee, and we all have to support him.
That was a pretty long pause when you were asked about concerns. What are your concerns about President Biden?
My concern really is that he could have another bad debate performance, but that's true of any candidate.
Just to be clear, sir, you do not want the president to drop out?
I do not.
Now he does not, Congressman. What do you think's going on there? Could you give us a little flavor of what's happening in D.C. right now?
I think it's dreaded resignation. They know that Joe isn't going to go anywhere. They know this is their fate, what they have to accept, whether Joe is going to be there or not. And so they're all, just as Schumer said, I'm with Joe. You know, good Lord, talk about somebody that has a hard time with the truth. They're going to try to persist with him, prop him up, and then, God forbid, guys, Kamala Harris becomes the president of the United States. This can't allow. And, you know, Joe goes back and says, look at what I've done in 3.5 years. Look at what you have done. We're not even talking about the issues anymore. Afghanistan, inflation, the woke military. God forbid our 16 million people coming in on the southern border. Let's look at the physical state of the president and then the future state, but then look actually at the disaster he's been for the last 3.5 years.
I mean, one could make the argument that even if President Biden makes it and stays in place until the election, at some point in the next 4 years, a vote for Biden means a vote for Kamala Harris. Is that right?
Absolutely, absolutely, and I think that's much sooner than people would realize.
And what do you want to say about Kamala Harris? I mean, I think Trump beats her too in the polls.
I do too. I mean, her approval rating was less than Biden's, and you know, look at what she's done. Her as vice president, that's absolutely nothing. In fact, the White House has marginalized her. That they've even the second gentleman, as he likes to call himself, was upset that Kamala's been so marginalized because she should have never been there in the first place. She's not a very good legislator and not a very good vice president.
All right, Congressman, I know you're going to be at the convention. We will be there as well, and we will be talking along the way. We so appreciate your time this morning, sir. Thank you.